All right, howdy, wee ones. How's it going? I hope you're ready for this. This is going to be quite the adventure of self-awareness. And this is going to be workshop one of the five voices for teams. And we're going to be discovering your leadership voice. The reason you're getting a video with this as well as we're going to be sitting in the workshop on Friday is because we were going to value your time. And Lizzie was very specific that everyone needed to get out of there at a reasonable time. And so our compromise was having some resources where you can watch the video ahead of time a little bit. It's going to be the first few parts of it. And then you can experience it in the room with everybody else. And so that's our hope for this. So I hope you enjoy it. I want to preface all of this as we get into this by talking about, excuse me, my experience with it was I was very skeptical when I first heard about it. I was a little argumentative, trying to understand, and I was trying to make sense of what they were talking about. But as I went through the continuing workshops and I started learning and digging in and doing more self-reflection and talking with the team, I realized that a lot of it made sense. And so I would encourage you to just stick it out, just to understand and be patient with me as I try to help you understand the dynamics that happen in personality. And so five voices itself is a new concept, but it's overlaid with the Myers-Briggs, which is a very consistent personality assessment that's been around for I think 50 years or so. And so that's a really big, excuse me, a really big benefit for that. And again, I'm super glad you're here, and I'm super excited to get started with this. And so typically it'll take about 2 to 3 hours for this to work, but we're gonna again try to shorten this up. We're gonna try to do 15 to 30 minutes now, and then shorten it up for the time that we're actually sitting together. But I encourage you to just take notes. There's going to be a handout we give to you on Friday. But yeah, let's just jump right in. And so, wouldn't it be great if every single person on your team could experience the positive attributes of their superpowers? Imagine how much it would improve the team's performance. And what we mean by this is every single person has a very unique experience they bring to the table. They have unique giftings. They all have unique strengths. And if everyone was able to tap into their strengths in a way that brought more to the team, and especially as it comes to caring for kids, if everyone was able to rally around that, rely on each other's strengths, be aware of what their strengths were, that would contribute to such a high performing team where they could really get so much done. And the team's performance as it relates to caring for people and caring for the kids and making sure they're learning in your environment, in your context, that would be incredible. And we want to encourage that. And the reason we do this is because the Five Voices for Teams is going to help maximize the unique strength of each team member. It's going to improve the communication in order to get strategically aligned. It will build camaraderie and expand relational trust. You will learn a leadership language that keeps everyone working together towards the common good. And this is a critical part. I've been in a lot of situations or heard a lot of people talk about communication could always be improved and talking about really vague strategies for improving communication. The giant concept that they bring to the table is communication does need to become better, and so the way they facilitate that is by creating objective language and helping people understand what it's like to be on the other side of them, helping people understand what it's like to have a conversation with that doesn't see people, it doesn't see things the same way you do. And so the way I see things is going to be very different than the majority of the staff in WeeOnes because most of you all are nurturers as you're going to learn, and I am on the opposite voice order as that. And so the learning a leadership language helps everyone to say the words, say the same words and mean the same thing. Because a lot of times what causes conflict is miscommunication and mixed expectations. It's because I said a word and you interpreted it this way, but I really meant it that way. And then there's this miscommunication and we're aggravated at each other because I think you got it and you think I got it, but neither of us understand what the other person's saying. And so creating an objective language where whenever I say a specific word about support or challenge or care or trust, we all understand what that looks like and what that means. We also want to elevate the team performance. The five voices is going to help us do these five things because it creates an operating system. It creates a framework for us to be able to use to create the objective language, to understand how to care for each other, to understand how to be there for each other, and to support each other. And so the whole premise is this simple, these two sentences right here. This is what Five Voices is built on. Everyone speaks, not everyone is heard. Everyone speaks, not everyone is heard. And so as we'll talk through the different voices and the different voice orders, what you see is that some voices are much quicker to speak up than others. Some are going to be more hesitant. And then even the ones that can speak up, sometimes they can't articulate what they want to say. And so this causes some of the other voices to just miss the goal that they're bringing to the table. And so this is the premise right here. So everyone speaks, not everyone is heard. How can we start understanding that perspective of sometimes we're just missing each other in our communications? And I'm sure many of you have experienced this in your closest relationships with your spouses and with your kids. I know for a fact you guys, many of you probably know this. Lucy is at the age where you say some things and it's just sometimes I think it clicks and sometimes she gives me this look and she shrugs her shoulders at me and I say, okay, I will just move on and not worry about that. But what happens is teams will function at less than 60% of their true potential. And this is based on giant global team performance assessment data. And so if you're a numbers person, each of these is backed by some sort of source of about where they got this information from. And then 82% of team members feel misunderstood and undervalued. 75% of employees quit because of bad bosses, not because of the job itself. And employees who aren't led well are 12 times less likely to be engaged. And so these are just some of the things that the five voices helps to try and change. And so because there's these gaps, because people are speaking but they're not being heard, and because they're the gold that they would bring to the table, the insight and the wisdom and the experiences and the potential is being missed, not being heard, being misunderstood. We're missing out on so many good things just because some of the people who are louder are failing to listen to the people who have really great ideas but are being quieter. And so, what if every voice around your table was truly heard, valued, and appreciated? And I want you to think about that for a second. Imagine how that would play out if you could hear each other's voice, understand the perspective they had, and you valued it, and you knew your voice was valued. Not just that you valued others, but you knew that when you came to the table and you started talking, people appreciated what you had to say. And then they appreciated it because they knew you bring such a unique insight into the table. Not that everyone has a perfect idea all the time that always needs to be executed on, but just being heard goes a long way for people. Just knowing that people care about what their perspective is goes a really long way. And so when a team communicates well, everything seems to work. And so team communication depends on each person becoming self-aware. And that's a critical piece of this. The more self-aware you are, the more you understand yourself, the more you can understand other people who understand themselves, and the better the dynamics of the relationships are inside your workplace. No one wants to work at a place where everyone's grumpy and mad all the time. Hopefully, if you're going to spend 8 hours or 9 hours a day somewhere, you enjoy it. You enjoy the people you work with. And so having a team that communicates well really sets such a great foundation for everything else because then you can enjoy coming to work, you can enjoy going on break, you can enjoy doing the day-to-day details, you can enjoy having conversations with people, even to the point where you're willing to hang out with them after work. But really all of this really hinges on becoming self-aware and understanding, again back to that premise, that starting point, that everyone speaks but not everyone is heard. And so this is a tool. Giant uses these visual tools to help people grasp these concepts. And this is called the relational intelligence matrix. So each of these arrows represents a spectrum. And I don't know if my mouse will pop up on the screen or not, but I'll look back in the recording and see it later. But you have this individual and group arrow, and then you have insights to actions arrow. And so as we look at this, the first part of this, an individual who has insight has awareness. They have self-awareness. And when you have self-awareness, it leads to behavior, right? Individual actions. Excuse me, that coffee's coming back up I just had. And then when you have a behavior, right, that's going to lead to dynamics inside the group. You see, inside an organization, what you have is a whole bunch of individuals who have awareness or don't have awareness, leading to a behavior, and a behavior then becomes incorporated into the many behaviors of the team, which creates group dynamics, and then that leads to performance, group performance. And so once we get to this, we are starting to tee up the flywheel of maximizing the team performance, maximizing what this team could accomplish if they had everything they needed to. And again, it all starts back with this individual self-awareness, becoming aware of who you are, what you're good at, where your strengths are, but also where your weaknesses are. And being able to look at your coworker or your spouse or your kid or a friend and say, this is where your strengths are and this is where my strengths are, and being able to find a balance in the middle of that. And it's all going to come back around to contributing to the organization and contributing to the team performance. Whether the organization is your family or your classroom or whatever that group is, it's all going to play a part. And so this is the maximizing team performance slide. And so if you think of this as a flywheel, right? You have communication as the first piece, you have relationships, you have alignment, execution, and then capacity. And so imagine this is spinning, and it starts with communication. That's the foundational piece. An organization that can't communicate can't really get anything done. And an organization that can't communicate very effectively and well is not going to get done nearly as much as an organization that does communicate well. But you have to start with communication because communication leads to relationships. Relationships leads to alignment within the team. Alignment with the team, people being where they need to be, being on the bus, but also being in the right seat on the bus, leads to execution. They're able to accomplish more because they're living into their strengths. And then you get to capacity because you're living into your strengths because you're a high performing member of the team. Your capacity becomes up because you're able to accomplish more living into your natural strengths. What happens though, a lot of times is leaders will push for results. They start with alignment and execution. They say, well, we need to get people aligned on what we need to do, and we need to make sure they're executing at their highest capabilities. But they skip communication and relationships. It's like the boss who's just driving you really hard to, hey, we need to get more done, we need to do better. And they're always making these weird little moves around, but they're not taking time to establish good, healthy communication, and they're not taking time to establish good relationships. And so what you have is these relationships that start to break down. And because you have that um, relationships that are breaking down because you never took the time to invest in them, the alignment and the execution are never where they need to be. And so green in all of the five voices, it always means healthy. So blue, I'm sorry, ran through those colors. Green is healthy, and red or yellow is unhealthy. And so again, this is like a spinning wheel. It takes a small member of the organization to just be a small contributor to make a big impact, and starts with communication. Communication with inside your classroom, communication with other classrooms, communication with the directors, communication with third-party people that come in. It all starts with communication, which contributes to relationship. And I would imagine that you guys can really relate to this when you think about whenever you're trying to work with a child, the point where they can start to communicate gets a little easier. I remember Lucy, she couldn't really talk well, and she would be hungry, and she would use the sign language of, want to eat. And we would walk her into the kitchen, and we would hold her, and she would point where she wanted to go. And so now that she can say some words, she doesn't say them very well, but now that she can say some words, we're able to say, okay, she actually wants this. And so that makes it a little easier. But once you even get past that and she can articulate what she wants clearly, it's going to just get much, much easier, right? And it's easier to develop that understanding of her. And so that same thing plays out in teams where if you're saying something and you're both missing each other, you're not helping anybody out. You're making it more difficult. And so that's why Five Voices says we need to start with communication and then lead to relationships. And then we'll get to alignment and execution and capacity. But if we don't have these two fundamental pieces of a communication and relationships, we're going to be working backwards down the road. And so all of these play out. And so each team, if you could imagine each one of these circles as a team, is going to have a performance percentage that's indicated in the center. And so this one's blank because we haven't done any sort of performance assessments. But each team is going to have a different color, and they're going to be contributing to the overall organization. So some teams might be really well. They might have really great communication, phenomenal relationships, and they understand what they need to be doing, how they need to be doing it, and they're able to accomplish a lot because of that. Also, some teams might be yellow. They might be struggling in a lot of these areas, contributing to a lower performance score. Or they might be red. They might be very unhealthy because there is no good communication and the relationships are lacking. And so the entire organization is feeling it because of that. And so we want to discover your leadership voice, and we're not going to go on much longer because I don't want this video to be too long. But we are going to go and go through the first voice. But I want to start with this analogy and this image of a plant. One of the things I heard a while ago is that leaders are like gardeners. They're tilling the soil, caring for the plants. And if you think about this simple thing of a plant, and it needs soil to grow, it needs sunlight, it needs water. If it doesn't have these really simple things and the right amount, it's going to die. Now, what's interesting about a plant is when you buy it, it comes with this little tiny card that tells you exactly what it needs. What it needs. I remember being a kid, and these were the coolest thing. I would just walk through the store, like the garden center, and I'd just yank these bad boys out, just toss them, and be like, "Man, these are cool." Or I'd find them in the yard. My dad would have planted something, and he'd have it stuck next to it, and I would just walk by and be like, "Well, this is cool," and run off with it. He would never know where it went. But what's great about these is they show you everything that the plant needs. It tells you what the habitat's like. It tells you how big it's going to be. It tells you how much space it needs. It tells you what zones it typically goes in. It tells you how much to fertilize it, how much water it needs, how much light it needs. And so it's interesting because what if people had this? What if people had a cheat sheet of saying, okay, I need to care for this person in this way. I need to support them in this way. They're seeing this from this perspective. This is the soil they need to grow. And as a leader, as a gardener, right, your responsibility is to the other person to be able to understand where they're coming from, to lead them at the highest possible capacity. And that takes time. Again, it all goes back to self-awareness. It takes energy. Understanding how you see things and then understanding how they see things. And so we all have these cards, right? It just takes time for us to unpack them and understand what they mean and what they look like. And so these are the 5 voices. And so I'm going to work from left to right, top to bottom, and I'm going to talk through each voice specifically, and then we're going to dig into the first voice today. And then we're going to re-hit it again on Friday because this one, the nurturer, is most people inside of WeeOnes, the majority seem to be nurturers. And one thing I want to preface with this is if you took the assessment and you read the results and you're like, that doesn't sound like me at all. That's okay. It happens. It's not a perfect assessment. It takes time. My first time I took the test, I got nurturer. Over time, I was talking with friends and family, with my wife, with the teams. I was doing a lot of self-reflection, and I found out that I am a pioneer, and so you can have some pretty drastic differences in what that looks like. But I answered how I wanted to answer. I answered wanting to be a relational, caring person, and not that I'm not. It's just not my natural strength, as we'll see as we talk through the voices. And so a nurturer, represented by this cross first aid bag, is a champion of people, relational harmony, and values. That little I don't even know what that's called. Cell tower looking, not cell tower. Hopefully you can see this, but this little purple bar is low because what this represents is the volume or decibel level of this voice. So nurturers are going to tend to be naturally quieter people. On the other hand, you have a pioneer. They're very loud people. And then you have connectors, which are a little less loud. And so you have these volume levels that can play out in the voices, where a natural nurturer tends to be a little quieter. They don't mind silence. They're not trying to fill up a conversation, while some of the other louder voices will fill up a conversation, and everyone's going to know they've showed up. And so you have champion of people, relational harmony, and values. They represent 43% of the population, which is a big number. That means most of the world is a nurturer. It's also interesting that in that 43%, 70% of nurturers are women. And so that's kind of where you can see that statistic and that stereotype of like women are just natural nurturers. And so yeah, there is some truth to that. Statistically, they do tend to be more nurturers than the other voices, but they're not boxed in by that, as you'll see as we go through the 5 voices. And with that, there's also strengths. Like they're still very capable leaders. There's probably some of the best leaders is because they understand people and the values and the harmony required. And they kind of have this ability to sense relational dynamics at play. So my wife is a nurturer. She is very quiet, introverted. She's capable of speaking up, speaking in front of people, but that's not her natural space. And she's like, I'd rather not do that. And so she's also present oriented. And so that's what each voice has an orientation, whether they're present or they're future oriented. So present oriented people are very comfortable just in the here and now. When they get free time, they're relaxed. They're just enjoying the moment. A future oriented voice, on the other hand, is thinking way ahead. Sometimes that's days ahead, sometimes that's years ahead. And so I'm a future-oriented voice, so I'm very much always thinking about what's coming next. What do I need to worry about next week or the week after? And what pieces do I need to organize now to set myself up well for the future? Next, we have creative. And so they are a little louder than a nurturer, but they're still relatively quiet. They are a champion of future ideas, innovation, and organizational integrity. Now, I don't want you to jump into this thinking that a creative is a an artsy person, like they just sit down and they do art. That can be the case, but creative is more like more out of the box. Like they think of things in a different perspective. They are like an early warning radar system because they're just like they're future oriented. So they're like, man, what if we did this? Or imagine if we could accomplish this, or imagine if we set the classroom up this way and it brought about this result and it was so beautiful. And so they're very future oriented, very creative. They love thinking about the future, sometimes to a fault where you got to bring them back to the present. And they represent 9% of the population. And again, they're very future oriented. Then you have a guardian. A guardian is like right in the middle. They are middle in voice and they are middle in order. Now, they are a champion of due diligence, resources, and efficient systems and processes. A guardian is someone who give me the result or what you want, and I will build a plan out to get there, and I will steward this plan. I will make sure the resources are lined up. They love to deliver results on time, and they represent 30% of the population, so it's our second biggest voice. And they're very present oriented. So again, like the nurturer, they're very consistent just being in the here and now and focusing on what they need to. And they're not like way up in the clouds or daydreaming. And then you have a connector, which is next up, which is a champion of relational networks, collaboration, and effective communication. They represent 11% of the population, and they are future oriented. A connector is like your Tawana Love is a connector. She just loves being around people. She loves getting to talk with them. She loves getting to hear their stories, and she just enjoys that, and she just thrives in that. Typically, connectors are very extroverted, and they just love being around people, getting to talk with people. And then you have a pioneer, the last voice. Now, they have this little red indicator next to that volume level because pioneers can be, in when they're unhealthy, very like break your eardrums, like loud, not necessarily screaming. Sometimes they do scream. Sometimes all the voices scream, but they do tend to be very loud in a situation, and they will push for their ideas to be heard. While a nurturer is like, okay, if nobody's listening, I'm not going to talk. A pioneer is like, no, people are going to hear me because I think that what I have to say is what people need to hear. And that's, again, that's a little bit unhealthy of them. And so each voice has a way they show up that's healthy and a way they show up that's unhealthy. But they're a champion of strategic vision, results, focused, and problem solving. And so while you have the guardian who is similar in some ways, and they're focusing on the present, here and now, managing the resources, the pioneer is like pushing towards this vision that they see. And they're trying to be strategic in the way they accomplish this. They can be a little abrasive at times. They can try almost bulldoze their ideas into situations, but they're a very small percentage of the population, and they are future oriented. And they're again, it's like, so each voice has a specific strength or some weaknesses that come along with it, and it takes the self awareness to know who you are and to know who you're interacting with, who they are. So I'm a pioneer, and my wife's a nurturer, which is a very interesting dynamic. And so where she's very good at picking up on relational cues and understanding how people are going to respond to things in a situation or even in a conversation, I'm just there talking, not really focusing on it as much. And where she's not really comfortable bringing a lot of challenge, I'm like, no, challenge has to be brought because how else are we going to learn and grow? And so there's these differences, right? And so sometimes the opposites attract, and it takes some self awareness because there was some things I said right in our marriage that's hurt her feelings, where she was this very caring, nurturing, relational person, and I was very future oriented. Hey, we got to get stuff done, and that could, when I showed up unhealthy, that could do a lot of damage. All right, so this plays out. Each voice, as you can see in the Scranton branch, right? If you watch The Office, this is kind of their mock-up. Each voice has, or each person has an order. So I am a pioneer, guardian, creative, connector, nurturer. each person's going to have a unique voice order. Obviously, some people, because just math wise, people are going to have similar voice orders or the same voice orders. Even then, they're going to still show up a little different because of their experiences. But each person who's taken the assessment down in WeeOnes, each one of you have a specific voice order, and you've gotten the results and you've been able to see them. And you've been able to read through a little bit and say, yes, this sounds like me, or no, it doesn't sound like me. And so let me move on. I don't want to take up too much more of everyone's time. An assumption: our voice is made up of all 5 voices. Some voices are more natural to us than others. Some are going to come across and you're going to be like, that doesn't sound like me at all. When I took the assessment and I got nurturer, and then I started listening to them explain nurturer, I was like, I don't know about that. I don't think that really sounds like me. And then when I asked other people, they were like, yeah, that's not you. Maturity allows us to value the contribution each voice brings and to show up as a healthy whatever voice you are. Whatever. So for me, it's healthy pioneer. I'm able to listen and rely on the nurturers and the guardians around me to think through some of the things that I might be missing. Nature, nurture, and choice have all played a part. Everyone has a unique voice order, and yes, some voice orders are going to be the same as someone else, but because of how you were raised, what you naturally are wired to do, and the choices you make, all of that has influenced how you are now. And so I would be careful about assuming what you know someone else's foundational voice is. While it's good to help guide each other through this process, jumping right into it can be dangerous because if you assume someone is uh, a guardian when they're really a nurturer and you talk to them how a guardian wants to be talked to, that could hurt some feelings. So I just caution you on that. And also, don't assume you know what each word means, as each voice has a specific phrase. I think creative is the one that gets mixed up a lot because people think, well, I don't do art, so I must not be a creative, and that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking more original reference of what that means. And then a nurturer, some people like seem to think that that's a bad thing when we need nurturers, right? They're the people who kind of keep the organizations uh, relational oil inside of organizations. And so, like I said, what drives behaviors, nature, nurture, choice, all play a part to result in your leadership behaviors. And what we mean by that is how you influence people around you is made up by what you're wired to be, your nature, how you were raised, and what experiences you had, which is your nurture, and then the choices you have made to bring you to this point are all going to contribute to that. And so as we go through this next, I think I'm going to cut it here and cover the rest during the day or during the meet. But just to kind of think this through, as we go through each voice, we're going to go into much more depth now in each voice. We're going to use this scale. So you have green with a little bit of yellow, you have yellow, and then you have yellow with some red, and then you have red. And so as we go through the next, I think it's 30, 40 slides, through the voices, you can rate them based on this scale. And yep, so whenever we get there, we're going to be starting right here at Nurturer. And so I will see you guys on Friday.